Good morning and welcome back to the lecture series on tribal studies, interdisciplinary perspectives and approaches. Today we are going to discuss the tribal uprisings during the colonial rule in the Chota Nagpur region. So, critics Crispin Bates and Alpa Shah in their work on tribal insurgency in India, which is entitled as a Savage Attack, and a work that came out in 2017, write that mid 19th century marked the start of routine caste tribe distinction by colonial officials. Regardless of the significant differences among the people that are classified as tribal, they were collectively viewed by the larger society as a race that is fundamentally different from the Indian mainstream. We see that worldwide the indigenous resistance has seen a resurgence in the recent years. In India, the spotlight has turned towards the Adivasi communities, officially designated as the scheduled tribes, who are now at the forefront of various forms of resistance. So, across India we see that from the colonial period till the present time, conflicts concerning forest access and control have been a dominant expression, a dominant reason that provokes, that stimulates tribal resistance. In Middle India, tribal societies were systematically integrated into the colonial system, encompassing its economic and administrative components, which is a contrast to the experience of those in the northeast. So, we see that the experience of the tribes, the struggles or the difficulties that they face is not really pan-Indian in nature. It is not something homogeneous across all parts of India. The northeastern tribes, the tribes from central or south India have their own struggles, have their own difficulties to reckon with. Despite challenges, the major tribal communities demonstrate high literacy rates and active participation in democratic processes, which leads them to strongly advocate for land and forest rights, which are crucial for their livelihoods. One of the four reasons that are given by K. Singh for Chota Nagpur to become the center of a dynamic separatist movement is due to a tradition of militant and organized struggles going back over 100 years, struggles that are organized around the land and forest resources. Other reasons, that makes Chota Nagpur, particularly a hub for separatist movements include, an area being the most advanced in terms of literacy. Chota Nagpur being, very advanced in terms of literacy, political consciousness and industrial progress, as well as concentration of major tribal communities. The colonial period marked a period of exposure for this previously inaccessible region of Chota Nagpur Plateau, driven by the construction of roads and railways, which also facilitated an influx of outsiders to this plateau. Furthermore, the imposition of the zamindari system and new legal framework significantly disrupted the traditional Santal economy in the Chota Nagpur region. Scholar and critic P. K. Sinha notes that the coal uprising of 1831 till 1833 is depicted differently by the different historians. L.S.S. O'Malley describes the coal uprising as the coal rebellion, noting the widespread participation of the Mundas and Oraons, who rose en masse alongside the Hos, Cheros and Kherwars. So, although these communities have traditionally been very simple people, they were easily roused and they took up weapons and actions against the authority because they also possessed a very strong sense of independence. So, courageous but resistant to external control, these tribal communities fiercely opposed the British rule and the imposition of the Bengal Code, which they deemed unsuitable for their region. While it was initiated by some of the Rajas and chiefs, the uprising was fundamentally a mass rebellion. Although immediate events served as a catalyst, we see that the core cause for coal uprising was the oppressive colonial system, specifically the agrarian policies, the debt laws and revenue regulations, which were perceived as unjust, as unfair both by the zamindars and their landless peasants or tenants known as ryots. So, next we are going to look at the Santhal Hul that happened between 1855 and 1856. A combination of the Santals' accumulated suffering with the authorities' persistent indifference had finally ignited, and this transformed years of simmering, seething tension among the tribals into a sudden and violent Santhal Hul or rebellion in the year 1855. According to scholar and critic Abha Salso, Sidhu and Kanu in their official declaration or parvanas accused both non-tribal outsiders or Dikus as well as the British officials or sahibs for their transgressions against the Santal people. So, Sidhu Kanu had identified both the non-tribal Indian people which comprised the Dikus and the British officials or the sahibs to be equal perpetrators against the tribal people, and so they considered both as their enemies. The tribals proclaimed the termination of British rule, demanding their retreat across the Ganges, and they believed that they had a divine mandate, so they threatened war. Considering that there is a divine mandate that they have to take up arms against the British, they declared war. They also declared that their deity that they call as Thakur had commanded them to eliminate the money lenders and police officers, to expel the traders, the landlords and the wealthy Bengalis from engaging with the tribal cosmos, right. So, they demanded that all these people that they together collectively called as the Dikus should sever ties with Daminico and engage in combat against any opposition, assuring their followers that enemy bullets would be turned to water. So, actually this was kind of a threat that all the non-tribals comprising the traders, landlords, the wealthy Bengalis and so forth, all the money lenders should actually quit the Daminico, which is the land of the Santals, which is part of the Santal habitation. The movement gradually expanded into regions such as Birbhum, Hazaribagh and Bhagalpur, with armed Santal rebels advancing towards Calcutta, which was the center of colonial authority. Laborers, landless farmers and displaced individuals joined the rebellion, leading to an escalation in the conflict. By February 1856, the Hul was crushed ruthlessly with a heavy hand, leaving 10,000 dead or in a desolate, desperate condition without food or shelter. Next, we are going to look at the Sardari movement that took place between 1858 and 1895. The Sardari movement's philosophy rested on the idea that the Adivasis, as the initial cultivators of Chota Nagpur region, held an inalienable entitlement to free access to its lands. There is very little data on the Sardar's social background. However, it is clear that the movement's leaders were mostly Mundas and Christians. A few of the leaders were traditional village officials and some had suffered in the coal rebellion. Following the rise of the Raja and afterwards the Maharaja of Chota Nagpur, the Adivasis were asked to make voluntary subscriptions to the central authority. However, they rejected this practice because it was foreign to their own traditional social structure. The Sardari movement's initial phase was largely non-violent, and it was marked by peaceful meetings and deference to officials. However, the period between 1885 and 1895 witnessed a gradual erosion of trust in the government and missions. This led to a growing inclination towards more violent and radical protest strategies, which were fully realized in the Birsa movement of 1895 to 1900. So, we see that taking up of arms and a violent protest was enacted between 1895 and 1900, which is known as the Birsa movement. So, talking about the Birsa movement, Birsa Munda's grassroots Adivasi revolt, which is known as Ulgulan, contrasted with the elite petitioning by the Indian National Congress, and it offered armed resistance to the British rule. So, Mahashweta Devi's Sahitya Akademi Award winning novel titled Aranyar Adhikar, which came out in the year 1977, vividly illustrates the Ulgulan or the revolt led by Birsa Munda, who was known as the Dharti Abba of the Munda tribe. Joseph Vara observes that though supported by Sardari Ladai, Birsa emerged as a leader in his own right. So, he went on to become a figure, a demigod like figure among the Munda people, the Mundadi tribe. So, we see that during the Birsa movement, Birsa Munda injected new radicalism into the existing protest in three ways. First, outrightly declaring all foreigners, including the British colonialists, the Christian missionaries, the landlords and other exploiters as Dikus, as Adivasis' enemies. Secondly, while the Sardari Ladai or movement, despite its radical claims, remained committed to constitutional agitation, during official indifference, Birsa Munda shifted the strategy to armed resistance, commanding his followers to violently oppose their adversaries. Third, we see that Birsa Munda propounded the idea of a Munda Disum or free desh, Disum meaning desh, a free desh or a free region, that is not exploited or that is not ruled by the Chota Nagpur Maharaja, the British rule and all other Diku elements, and therefore Munda Desum should be based on Adivasi self-rule. Despite their immense courage, despite the immense courage that the Mundas actually exhibited during the Birsa movement, the Adivasi rebels using traditional weaponry were outmatched by the British military's advanced arms. Birsa Munda's capture ended this revolt, but the spirit of Ulgulan and his organizational methods served as a symbolic victory, forcing the British to acknowledge the Adivasi voice. To conclude, we see that the Chota Nagpur uprisings spanning from Kor rebellion to Birsa Munda's Ulgulan were driven by Adivasi resistance against colonial as well as local exploitations, loss of land, oppressive policies and cultural disruption all together fueled these movements. While early uprisings such as the Sardari Ladai relied on constitutional methods and went on to protest through peaceful methods, we see that Birsa Munda's leadership marked a shift to armed resistance. So, it was more radical, it actually believed in taking up arms, it actually induced the tribal people to take up arms and demanded complete Adivasi autonomy. Despite military suppression, these uprisings, especially the Ulgulan, demonstrated the Adivasi determination to defend their own rights and forced the British to acknowledge their grievances, thereby leaving a lasting legacy of resistance. So, with this we come to the end of our lecture today. Let us meet with further discussion in our next lecture. Thank you.